Me now?
Yeah, we're going to get started here in just a second. Okay, today is Tuesday, June 24th, 2008. We are at the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society in Buffalo, New York, and we're interviewing, where's...
Ken Janish.
What? Oh, I've got it right there, I'm sorry. We're interviewing Ken Janish today, and the interviewers are Wayne Clark and Kathleen Vogel-Matthews. Mr. Janish, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth?
Kenneth F. Janish. I was born July 31, 1923.
And whereabouts were you born?
I was born in Buffalo here.
Okay. And did you attend school here in Buffalo?
I went 3 years of high school.
Okay.
And then I volunteered for the Airborne service.
Okay.
I was going to get drafted anyways, but so I actually volunteered for Airborne school.
Okay. And why did you volunteer for Airborne? Did you have any family members that were in it?
Well,
or?
actually, during the Russians fought Finland during the early war, and I see the Russian parachuters coming down, and I was only a kid then, maybe 9, 10, 11, 12, and I used to jump off the garage with an umbrella, and I says, I'm going to be an Airborne guy. And that's basically why I got in.
Okay. And what date was that you went in?
I went in December 42.
Okay. And do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was listening to a football game on radio.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the national teams was playing football, and all of a sudden they broke in and said that they're bombing Pearl Harbor, and I didn't even know where that was at the time.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and until they said Hawaii.
Okay.
But that was how I learned about it.
Okay. And you entered the service here in Buffalo?
I was drafted and volunteered here. I was sent down to Camp Toccoa in Georgia.
Okay.
And that was sort of you'd go there before you'd go to jump school, and they would put you through a month of rugged training, because over 50% couldn't make it. They wanted to get rid of, unless you really want to be an airborne guy.
Okay.
And then after that, we went to Fort Benning, and I learned how to jump out of towers, and they taught us how to pack our own chutes.
Now, how long was that training for?
That was only a couple weeks.
Okay.
At Fort Benning. We went to jump school.
And you actually packed your own parachute?
And we actually learned how to pack our own chutes the ones we jumped. Later on, they didn't do that anymore.
Okay.
And
how many jumps did you make?
you made 5 jumps, and then you received your parachute wings.
Okay.
After that, I was sent to Camp Blanding in Florida, and I was the 508 Parachute Regiment was forming.
Okay.
And I joined that.
Was that part of the 82nd Airborne?
At that time, it wasn't. They were just forming. The 82nd was being formed in another place.
Okay.
And we started training at the 508. Was just starting. We was assembling, and we made a couple of parachute jumps, one in North Carolina and another one in Tennessee, and we got ready for combat training. And right after that, I went home for a short furlough, and we went overseas.
How did you go overseas?
On a boat, the James Parker.
Okay.
And we landed first in Ireland, spent a few days there, a couple weeks there actually.
Now, did you go over with the entire regiment?
Yes, on the one boat. Yeah, every 2 feet there was a guy. They had cots right from the bottom. There would be about 10 cots. You couldn't move.
Did you get sick at all on that trip?
Yeah, I actually got bad. I actually come down with a little pneumonia. We went out on guard. The German tanks, submarines, we had a submarine attack, and I went out on deck with hardly any clothes, and they caught a real bad cold. And when I got to Ireland, they took me off in a stretcher, actually, and I spent a little time in a hospital there.
Okay.
And then the rest of the fellows went to Edinburgh, Scotland. After about 2 weeks, I met up with them again.
Okay.
That was Edinburgh. we stayed in a camp. It was just tents, right in the park,
Mm-hmm.
and we see more training and a couple more parachute jumps, and they stopped jumping us because so many guys were getting cracked ankles, they were broken legs, and they were afraid that there wouldn't be enough of us to jump on D-Day, I guess.
Okay.
So they stopped jumping.
Now, what date was that you arrived overseas? Do you recall?
It was right around the first of the year.
1943 or?
43, right.
Okay.
And we used to, I used to always say we used to train in Sherwood Forest because it was Nottingham and never could find Robin Hood. It was one of the local jokes we had.
Uh-huh.
Anybody could find him, we get a week off. And, well, we trained for D-Day in Normandy and while we were there, and that was on June 6th. And
Of 44.
44.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Had you seen any combat at all prior to that?
no.
Okay, you'd stayed in England and Scotland.
Actually,
Okay.
the 82nd had gone down to Sicily and made some jumps.
Okay.
And, and when it came up, there used to be only 2 parachute regiments.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went into D-Day, they added the 508 to bring it up a little more strength.
Okay.
And we stayed with them the rest of the war.
Okay, leading up into D-Day, you want to talk about the training?
Well, basically, we had a couple of parachute jumps, and we'd go out on maneuvers, and as I said, we used to go into Sherwood Forest, and it was almost like, same as we trained like for combat. We'd go to maybe a bridge, and the mission in Normandy, our mission was to land in between these 2 rivers, the Douve and the Merderet,
Mm-hmm.
and our mission was to, they had these causeways and bridges, and we were supposed to take the bridges and hold the Germans back so they couldn't get up to the beaches. That's mainly what 508's mission was.
Okay. Now, leading up to D-Day, did you have any idea where you were going?
Yeah, a fellow named Ed Fields was from Kensington, and he came down one day and he told me we were going into Normandy.
Uh-huh.
Actually, it was funny, when they started to brief us, they were afraid to tell us, and I was telling all my squad that we were going to Normandy, and then, the guy, the lieutenant made a mistake and said, it's like Norma, no, and we all laughed about it. But I often wondered how many Germans knew about it too.
Uh-huh.
Normandy was all fouled up. We got on the planes about right after dinner.
Now, what kind of plane was it? Was it
C-47s.
C-47s?
They were
Okay.
all C-47s at that time. There was about 20 guys in the stick.
Okay. Now, did you guys jump at night?
We went in about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
We landed about 8 to 10 miles inland at these rivers.
Okay, and you parachuted out?
Right. And there was a lot of anti-aircraft company, a lot of anti-aircraft fire, and it was a fog, so we were spread all over the peninsula, which was good because the Germans couldn't find us either.
Uh-huh.
They were more or less stationed where we were supposed to be, but we were so scattered that it was just small groups, like 1, 2, 3, 8, 10.
Now, once you hit the ground, were you able to find the fellows in your platoon?
Not really. A lot of the Germans had dammed these rivers up, and it was flooded, and we lost about 20% of our guys landing in the ocean. And you had like 200 pounds of equipment on them.
Oh.
They drowned. And I was lucky I landed on the bank, and I was able to crawl out. And the first man I met one of our troopers from but it wasn't even my squads or nothing.
Uh-huh.
And that's how you did. You said flash and thunder, and there was the passwords. And
now, did you have one of those cricket devices?
I was going to tell you about that. The 101st had crickets, and we had flash thunder. And I'm sorry to say, a lot of fellows were lost because of that. You'd say flash, and the guy would go click, 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 and a lot of guys got shot. But they never told us.
Uh-huh. Now, your job was, you were an infantryman?
I was an infantryman.
Okay.
And I crawled out of the chute. Actually, you take a knife and cut yourself out. And I used to always cut my parachute up so I could use it as a blanket.
Uh-huh.
And that's, later on it saved my life because when we got to the Bulge, because I had a blanket anyways. But anyway, we started meeting in small groups, 4, 5, 6 guys, and we started moving up the river towards a place called Hill 30.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the headquarters of the 2nd Battalion. And we'd have firefights with the Germans, and they would run one way or we'd go the other. We couldn't really take anything because there was not of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning we finally ended up at this place called Hill 30, and it overlooked the river where the point, it was Point de Hoc. There was a causeway there, and we knocked the causeway out so the Germans couldn't use their tanks to come across. And we spent the next week there. There was about 300-400 of us,
Mm-hmm.
and we just kept the Germans from being able to go across the causeways and hitting the beaches. That was our main.
Now, were you finally able to link up with your platoon at that point?
Not really. I mean, there would be 1 or 2 guys from my platoon, and some guys from the 82nd. It was all messed up. They were all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And
what about casualties? Were there a lot of casualties in your unit?
lot of. You would have a firefight, and you'd get 4 or 5 guys together and run into a firefight, and there'd be 1 or 2 left, and we'd move on and meet 4 guys, and
Mm-hmm.
it was all small stuff. Nothing coordinated.
Mm-hmm.
About the 5th day, the 90th Division finally come up from the beaches, and we were able to finally get our regiment together.
Mm-hmm.
And about 2 days later, they brought some boats up, and really the first time we got together as a regiment, and F Company, which was part of my company, we were chosen we led the way across this Dube River on these boats, and we got on the other side, and we took this. They had 3 German tanks guarding this bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and we knocked them out, and we more or less took that area so the rest of the regiment could come across. And
did you meet any more resistance besides the tanks?
well, that's as soon as we got the regiment together, we started moving into town, and the Germans, we sort of surprised them,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't give up much resistance. We stuck up on them, and I guess they didn't expect us,
Uh-huh.
and more or less took off. And we didn't have too many casualties there. The one thing we did is we captured a lot of Calvados and stuff, these trucks that the Germans had, and we hadn't slept much for the first week, and I can remember we had a few snorts, and I laid down, and if the Germans would have come back that night, they'd have cleaned us all up. That's a funny story, I guess. Couldn't have been funny if something would have happened.
Now, what about supplies and food in that? Were you living on K rations mostly?
You had K rations and candy bars,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever you could get.
Mm-hmm.
You really didn't have enough food.
And how were you treated by the French civilians?
Not really that well. They were pretty scared, you know. I mean,
Uh-huh.
they were afraid that the Germans would come back and kill them. We did it. They helped us, and some of them would help, some of them wouldn't. They didn't really get involved with it too much.
Okay.
The resistance wasn't there. After going across that river, I don't know if you know, they had hedgerows,
Yes.
and for the rest of the time we were in Normandy, we would just go and fight one hedgerow at a time in German.
How tough was that getting through those hedgerows? I understood there was a lot of, the Germans would hide behind them.
Well, that's what I say. It was a case of, it's not like a big war. You'd have little patrols, like 10 guys would fight 10 Germans, and then they would fall back, and maybe down the line another group would do the same thing, and you kept forward, and the Germans were pulling back because one of the things that we had done at that first day is one of the patrols from our company met this German tank, the German car coming down, and they killed the commander of the whole area, the German general.
Oh.
And I don't think the Germans really, that and Rommel was back in Germany with his party with his wife or something, a birthday party, and I think that was one of the reasons we had a success. They weren't ready for us.
Uh-huh.
And for the next months, we were just fighting little. You have a lot of casualties that way. But it was just go over a hedgerow, a little firefight. They would fall back, and another group would come up, and they'd go down on the right flank, and then maybe it's our turn next. And that's the way it was for the whole time we were in Normandy. It was all small firefights. These hedgerows, it was little farm places. They would only like 100 yards, and it would be instead of a fence, that's what they had.
Mm-hmm.
They were about 4 foot high, and then there would be bushes on top of it, and it was pretty well camouflaged.
Mm-hmm.
And after I think we were only there about 30, 40 days, and they pulled us back into England.
Okay.
We got ready for the jump in Holland.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that was Nijmegen?
Nijmegen. Well, when Nijmegen Market Garden was the mission of that. Basically, the Airborne divisions. We jumped in Arnhem, and at Nijmegen, the British jumped in Arnhem, and then Montgomery was supposed to he wasn't supposed to have much resistance, and he was supposed to come right through. And when we held the bridges, they would be able to go right on through and over the bridges and down into Germany, and then that was the end of the war, according to what Montgomery said, anyway.
Okay. All right, you want to tell us about getting ready? Yeah, getting ready to go into Holland and the jump. And
yeah. Well, when we went into Holland, we went into Scotland for some training, and I lost my stripes there.
Uh-oh.
I had brought every fifth shell in a machine gun is a tracer.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to take them out because you'd start firing and the Germans could zero it. So we used to take them out. And I had two there were boxes of ammunition.
Ammo cans?
Yeah, and when we got to Scotland on these maneuvers, I passed them out to the rest of my squad, and we were firing. On the maneuvers, we were going forward and firing these tracers, and they turned around, and the Colonel Lindquist and General Gavin was standing there, and "What are you doing with that stuff?" And I said, "Well, I brought it back from Normandy, sir, and when I got back to camp, I lost my stripes."
Now, what rank were you in?
Sergeant.
And they busted you down to PFC? Or?
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
So I was an acting gadget the next time I went into Holland.
Okay.
You'd do it, but you wouldn't get paid. It would just come. And, well, in Holland, we come down in the daylight.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and there was not much resistance at all. We were able to go right over and grab the bridge over in Nijmegen. We were able to take that real easy. And we were called the Red Devils of the 508. And our mission was there was a hill overlooking the area, and the Germans had mortars and 88s, and they could control the area from that hills. So we spent the next 2 or 3 days taking that hill, the 508. And it was a lot of tough fighting there.
Mm-hmm.
You go up and you take the hill, and the next thing you know, they chase us down, and we named it the Devil's Hill, after the Red Devils.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big battles was there was a little tavern at the corner, and I think that was, one day we'd own it, the next day the Germans would own it, and later on, I went to Holland, and I went back to the area,
Mm-hmm.
and the Dutch people still named that Devil's Hill. That was one of the things and the other thing is, I went to that tavern, and the Dutch people were wonderful. They told me where it was, and we had dinner, and it was all in the house. And
The tavern is still
yeah,
there?
the tavern was still there.
Wow.
And they took us to the Heineken factory, and the Dutch people were great.
Mm-hmm.
They would come down, and they asked me if I had jumped there, and some guy from upstairs come down and gave me and my wife 2 steins. And it was like that all the way time we were there.
Uh-huh.
It was also my 17th of the day we jumped in September is my anniversary date. And the whole time I was there, I didn't pay for nothing.
Well, now, were you married?
No,
Okay.
no, it was the same day, but it was a few years later.
Okay.
I didn't know my wife during the war.
Okay.
I'll come to that later.
All right. After Nijmegen,
Well, as I said before, Montgomery was supposed to, he didn't have much resistance, but it still took him over 3 days to get to us.
mm-hmm.
And by that time, the British at Ardennes ran out of ammunition, and they gave up, so it was a stalemate the rest of the time we were in Holland. And I know now, when we talk about the mission in Market Garden, we always say it was Montgomery, the Montgomery two steps forward and 1 back, because he just didn't push it.
Yeah.
If Patton would have been there, we'd have been in Germany by that time. I still believe that, because the Germans were really surprised, except for a few places we didn't really have a lot of. Another thing, while we were there, we went into Germany, and I think we were the first troops that ever actually got into Germany, because that was on the border.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told that we were the first troops that ever actually made it into Germany. The rest of the war was sort of a stalemate, and we just a lot of shelling. We could see the V1 rockets. They were only about 10 miles away from us. We could have knocked them places out, and a lot of things we could have done if he had gotten there.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen. And it was mostly patrol fighting, and we were only there about another month, and then we went back into a place called Sassone, France.
Okay.
And it was a rest area, and we were able to regroup. And the story there was a newspaper man from Buffalo came to camp one day and wanted to know if there was anybody from Buffalo, and me and 2 other troopers were sent to Paris with him, and we made a broadcast out on tape in Paris.
Oh.
And they sent that back home. He went back to Buffalo with the tape, and those days it was a recording.
Uh-huh.
And my mother and father, Bob, you remember? And
I remember.
it was played on WBN radio, and it was really.
Don't know what happened to it.
And my mother played it so much she wore it out. But that's they just missed us so much.
Uh-huh.
And we were only there about 1 day. We were supposed to be there 3 days, and we were told to get back to camp. And when we got back, the guys were jumping on the trucks and heading for D-Day. And I just had a chance to turn them up, get into my clothes. No winter clothes at all. And the only thing that saved me is I always had my parachute,
Uh-huh. Now you mentioned D-Day, but was it the Battle of the Bulge?
This was the Battle of the Bulge now.
Okay, yep.
This was in around I'd say around the 20th of December, something like that.
Okay.
And it was zero weather and miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And
And you went up to the battle area in trucks?
they took us on these flat things, about 20 guys would get on a truck and away we went.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up in Belgium. And we went along this, it was called the Salem River. And we were told to try to hold that area. And the F Company, or at least a couple of squads, there were some bridges down there. And we were told to blow them, so we just took a lot of grenades and bazooka shells and put them together and pulled. We put a string and pulled a couple of the hand grenade things and ran like hell and blew the bridge up.
Mm-hmm.
But it just blew part of it up, at least enough that the tanks couldn't get across. And then we just dug in on the other side, waiting for the Germans.
Uh-huh.
And it took them about maybe 2 more days before the Germans started to really get to us. And they were all SS troopers and dressed in white.
Uh-huh.
And for the next about 3-4 days, they just kept coming at us. They'd shell us, and probably the toughest time of the war. There was a lot of casualties there. They would just come charging up, and we just kept mowing them down. And after about 3-4 days, they just didn't have it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And really, they started pulling back, and because Patton arrived with his tanks, and the Americans' airplanes were able to start coming in. There was no more fog, and
Mm-hmm.
we started bombing them. And basically, I think that was pretty much the end of the war. The Germans didn't really, they started giving up.
Now, did you get wounded at all?
Not there, I did, but later on.
Okay.
Actually, it wasn't much later. We finally started moving up. After we started moving forward, the Germans just kept giving up. There was small groups would come up and give up, and there wasn't a lot of fighting from that time on. All the way along the line, it was only another month or so, then the Germans would actually surrender. We ended up going through the Siegfried Line and in a place called the Hurricane Forest.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we got a little, I guess I got a little careless. As we were going through there, the Germans would just waste their artillery, their mortar shells, and they kept throwing out everything they had at us, and I got wounded, and that was the end of the war for me. I was sent back to
Okay.
France.
Now, in the Hurricane Forest, I heard that a lot of the artillery shells were hitting tree limbs and
Well, that's what
tree
it was,
bursts.
tree burst, you know. There wasn't much left of it, Hurricane Forest. The trees were all,
Mhm.
they were like buffalo, you know, after the storm.
Mhm.
There was not much on them, but that's how I got hit.
From a burst like
It
that.
wasn't artillery, it was the mortar shells.
Okay.
Artillery, I probably wouldn't be here.
All right. And where were you wounded?
In my leg and back.
Uh-huh.
And I went back to France and I spent time in a hotel, hospital. And by the time I got out, the war was over.
How long were you in the hospital for?
But maybe 3 weeks.
Okay.
I was still able. I just when I started walking around, they said I could go back to my outfit. And by that time, the war had ended, and we ended up. Eisenhower made the 82nd Airborne his guard, honor guard.
Uh-huh.
That's what we're still called, the Guard of Honor. And I ended up in Berlin, and that was good duty. I didn't smoke, and you could sell your cigarettes
Mm-hmm.
on the black market. I would be able to send my paycheck plus 10% home every month. Which
So you were involved in the occupation.
I was in the occupation. Berlin was 4 zones. One was British, one was French, one was English, and Russian, and then American. And we all printed the same kind of money.
Uh-huh.
And the Russians printed so much money that nothing was worth nothing.
Yeah.
you'd have to have $10,000 to buy a watch.
Now, did you have any encounters with the Russians at all?
Oh yeah, we sold them some penicillin one time, and or they thought it was. And about 2 days later, they come back with thanks. They wanted their money back. The Russian soldier was a nice guy, but there was no coordination. They would desert and one from one to the other, and we'd turn them back into. At first, we'd turn them back into the what they. I can't remember the word for the Russian police or whatever they were, but they would just take them out and shoot them.
Oh, really?
So we stopped doing that. Another thing about Normandy, if we go back to that, a lot of the soldiers we captured, they were actually Ukrainian. They were working as more or less support troops and that. They'd come up and say me Ruski, and some of the fellows were Polish and they could talk with them. And that was a funny thing actually. And when we turned them back, Russia executed all those people, which was a bad thing.
Do you remember where you were and how you felt when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
Yeah, we were heading in. It was in France. The war was over by that time, just about over, and we were getting ready to go to Frankfurt and Berlin, and they told us he had died. And then we had a ceremony for him, which I can't remember what it was. Probably about May or June. I'm not even sure of the date anymore.
Okay. Was there any talk about at that point the war was still on in the Philippines or in the Pacific, right?
Yeah, I know. We also heard about the atom bomb. Some of our guys were supposed to be the ones that had been in a lot of combat. They were going to send them over to, and the war ended real quick, so it never happened.
Okay. Was there a lot of celebration when it was all over?
Yeah, I guess. Not, we were happy naturally, but you just took things.
Okay.
I was able to save some money in Berlin, and then my father said, "You better come home." And on the way home, on the ship coming home, I won quite a bit of money shooting craps, and we started our milk business. We bought a beat up old truck, and my father, me, and Bob, we going out knocking on doors, and it was pretty easy to go on and say, because there hadn't been no deliveries during the war, and we'd go up and say, "I'm starting a business, and I'd like to be able to fiddle milk," and we were able to, for the next, until about 2 months ago, last July, we pedaled right up to London.
Oh.
We only got rid of the business.
Oldest known
While I was in the hospital.
world, I tell you.
Well, we had slowly phased it down over the years.
Now when were you discharged and where were you discharged?
I'm trying to think of the camp in New Jersey now. Was it Kilmer?
Fort Dix?
Fort Dix, you got it.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember the name. I was discharged from Fort Dix, right?
Okay. And when was that?
January of '46.
Okay.
Right around. I was able to go home, and they sent me home on a 2-week furlough, and then when I went back, I got my discharge.
Okay.
I had stayed in. I could have run home earlier, but I was making that money in Berlin, and I wanted to save a few bucks.
Now, somewhere I saw here there's a funny story about you finding a German motorcycle.
Well,
riding it around.
It was actually a Volkswagen. It wasn't a motorcycle.
Oh.
That was in Holland. As I said, we had these small patrols, and one day about 6 of us were sent on a patrol and go down into this one area, and we had all these Dutch people with us, and they had shotguns, and they had, and we went into town, and we ran into this German, they had this car, and we got rid of those guys, and we took the car over. We were running around with the car, and looked around, and all the darn Dutch people took off, and the Germans were coming back, and they started firing at us, and the guys jumped in the car, and I had there was not room for me, so I ended up on the hood of the car, and we scooting around town, and we ran into the British coming in finally.
Uh-huh.
And it could have been worse, but it was a good story.
Now you also there's a story here about you slaughtering a cow or pig for food.
Yeah, well, that was in Holland, and this little, it was actually a calf, came down, and we were pretty hungry by that time. We were eating a lot of apples.
Uh-huh.
Had apple orchards there, and except for one day we were able to, Germans come up with a bunch of bicycles, and we shot the hell out of them, and they had beef from Argentina.
Uh-huh.
And that kept us going for a while, and then when we got this cow, we slaughtered it, and we had a big, like a garbage can, and we started throwing it, cut the cow up, throw the cow in, so Bermuda, anything we could throw, we threw in it, and we boiled the damn stuff, and we had a few drinks, and the guys started putting the carcass of the cow over them. Each one of us, we'd run around with the goddamn. There's actually a film of that. One of the fellows at the regimental headquarters
Uh-huh.
came up, and there is a film of that. And my daughter's trying to get that. It shows the guys running around with this, well, stupid thing.
Now you never had foot problems or frost
Well,
fight or.
one of the things with the parachute, I was able to cover myself pretty well
Uh-huh.
on the front lines. And every night I would take my shoes off and rub them in the snow, and I always had 2 or 3 pairs of socks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd, well, not really wash them out. You'd put them under your arms and let them dry out.
Yeah.
And I kept changing, and I never did get frozen feet. A lot of guys did because they were afraid to take their boots off.
Mm-hmm.
And I survived pretty well that way. We dug a hole, a big foxhole. It would hold about 5 people, 5, 6 people, and we covered it with dirt, branches and dirt, and we found a few candles. And when you'd come off of patrol, we were allowed to. It was one of the places we'd go in there and warm up just for a little while,
Uh-huh.
and that's how you survived. It was really tough. I think we lost more guys with frozen feet than we did with casualties.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it was. If it lasted, I don't know how the Germans kept coming. I mean, they were dressed in Parkers, and the ones we fought anyways. But I think that's what helped us. They couldn't stand it either. I don't know how they kept going really.
Mm-hmm. Once you got out of the service and you started the business, did you use the GI Bill at all?
No.
Any kind of loans or anything?
No. We had a few bucks, and I lived at home with my father and Bob, and the few bucks we had, we bought an old truck and started peddling milk and made a few bucks. You didn't have to have much to live on.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't pay no rent at home, and whatever, we sort of pooled it as a family,
Uh-huh.
and we'd go out. We only had that one truck, so we didn't spend a lot of money, and we were able to build it up a little.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did make a lot of money. Never did make much money in the milk business. Actually, it's been a tough business for the whole time we were in.
Uh-huh.
And actually, when I went to the hospital this last time, I was in 5 months, and I my kidneys left go and I was in pretty rough shape. I almost didn't come out, I guess, what they tell me. I had that renal, what is it, Bob? What do they call that, renal
failure.
failure. So luckily, I've been lucky to come out of that. Scared the hell out of my old lady.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did you get married?
Well, I'll go, in order to say that, I met my wife roller skating. And we did a little roller skating before the war. It was cheap date, you know. 75 cents, you could take a girl, 2 bottles of pop, what the heck. And I met her at Skateland. Actually, I used to skate at I met her girlfriend first, because I used to skate at
Scott's or Arena?
huh?
Scott's or Arena?
The arena. Before the war, we used to skate at a place on Bailey Avenue, the wagon wheel, and then we went back to it. And I met Gloria, that was her girlfriend, and I went to Skateland one time, and she told me her boyfriend was coming home, so it never went any place. In fact, I got him as a customer, and one day she said, I want you to meet my girlfriend, and that's how I met Evelyn. Still shaking in there, you know. It took her square dancing quite a bit. And I remember she wore high heels the first time, and I tell the kids, you know, you spin around, and she went to the next guy, and when the next thing I know, she was on her rear end, and her legs went up, and I said, man, that's the girl for me. Yeah, still talk about that. It's been 59 years we're going to be married pretty soon, and I have 2 daughters and two grandsons, and I got a great-granddaughter now and her husband Dale. My daughters is Mary and Evelyn, and my grandsons are, my son-in-laws are Dale and Carl, and my granddaughter's name is Stacy and Jason, and I got a little pot now. It's called Haley, and my great-granddaughter. And it's really, I'm a lucky guy. I've gone through a lot, and I have a lovely family, and I always say that probably the greatest accomplishment in my life is the day I was talked Evelyn into saying yes. You know, whoopee, what a happy day that was. Story of my life. Other than that, there's not too much to tell you about.
Did you stay in contact with any of the fellows you were in the service with?
Basically, we have an Airborne club here in Buffalo, and I used to go to the Airborne meetings, you know, in the 508, but they stopped doing it about 3 years ago. But we go once a month to on the Pulaski Club here in Buffalo, and it's all Airborne guys. And we go, well, Bob and me are both officers there. I'm the chairman, and it's the vice chairman, and he's a trustee, and we spend a lot of time with that. And we're pretty active. We march. I don't march now too much, but we go to parades like Memorial Day, and this last Memorial, we went to in DPU, and we were part of the celebration. We go to different towns and march, and we're pretty active actually. We have an honor guard. If somebody dies, we go to the funeral and stand at the grave, at the casket, and we put a 80-second seal on the casket, and go out to shoot the guns off, and do all the ceremonies for anybody that dies in our outfit. So I'm fairly active in it.
Okay. How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life? Just say.
Oh, made me grow up pretty fast, I guess. You know, when you're 18 years old, back in those days, it's like being. I think my three-year-old granddaughter knows more than I do. You weren't taught a lot. you went to school, but I don't think we were very smart. We
Mhm.
didn't know a lot of things. And your father and mother were pretty strict, and it's sort of a lot stricter than they are nowadays. My father come out and whistle, and we come racing home, but we better come racing home. He didn't have to spank us,
Uh-huh.
which is, I say, I never spanked my kids either, but they turned out good. My wife was fairly strict with them.
Mhm.
Probably compared to now, they're probably real strict. I don't know what else to say about that. It's just that I've just had a good life.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your interview.
Right?
Joel?
Okay, do you want to tell us about the awards and decorations you received?
Yeah, I had, first of all, one of my proud ones is my parachute badge with 2 stars with the jumps in Normandy and Holland.
Mm-hmm.
I have they call it the Arrowhead, and that was awarded to only the ones that went in the first day in Normandy. I have a presidential citation from Normandy. I had 5 combat campaigns, and I have a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star and Victory Medal, and even got a good conduct medal out of it.
Now, did you ever get your sergeant stripes back?
No,
Okay.
never got them back. We started moving around too much. And,
Uh-huh.
I was acting gag. After I got wounded, I didn't go back right to the 508. I went into Berlin, and that was the 508 was. I didn't get right back in the OF company again.
Mm-hmm.
We were more or less there, stationed there until we could go home. So it wasn't. I didn't really have no contact with these people. They were all new people.
Okay. Did you, I forgot to ask you this earlier, did you ever get to see any USO shows or anything like that?
Nope, they never did it, and like they said that they used to bring coffee and donuts up, and they used to charge us for donuts, which I just, to this day, that was not a good thing. I wouldn't even eat them.
Now, who did that? The
The Red Cross.
Red Cross? Okay.
And, yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, maybe I still have a little bug up my rear end about that.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
That's about it, I guess. I got, France gave me the Fourragère, and I also got one from Belgium, and I got another one from Holland, and I also, it was a Representative Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
I got an award from them for being in the Normandy on the first day. The French government gave me that. And I also, Representative Reynolds gave me a couple medals here, what was it, about a year ago? A year and a half, Bob?
Couple years ago.
2 years ago maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple extra medals that I was awarded. And that's about it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Where were those extra medals from? Reynolds, U.S., France?
Yeah, well, they were because of the combat. And I was supposed to get them, but they had never sent them to me, and he looked them up, and he awarded me in Lancaster. We had they had the press there, and it was in the news.
Okay. Thank you.